So in this video I'm going to talk about order of operations, and we'll talk about how that applies to evaluating an expression. Let's start out with order of operations. In previous math classes you might have seen this phrase, Pemdas. And to help remember the order of operations there, your teacher might have told you that it stands for Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally, which is an okay acronym to use or tool to remember the order of operations, but it's not perfect. The reason why is if you remember that in PEMDAS, the P represents that the first thing we do is take care of parentheses or do whatever's in parentheses first. Well, the problem is that sometimes there's more than just parentheses that we need to do first. So really, our first step in the order of operations should be to take care of grouping symbols. So instead of P, it should be Pemdas. So I don't know what new phrase you could come up with, but that's really the order it should be in. Because the grouping symbols could be things like, it could be parentheses, but it could also be brackets would be a grouping symbol. The absolute value symbols are grouping symbols. A square root sign is a grouping symbol. A division bar where we have something in the numerator and you have something in the denominator, that's a grouping symbol where you'd have to do the numerator first, the denominator second, and then divide them. So really, again, instead of having P, we should be using G for grouping symbols as the first step in the order of operations. The second step, PEMDAS does a good job of, and that is to take care of any exponents. And while we're working on this, let's look at an example here that's going to help with this next couple of steps. Let's look at this example. Let's say if I had the equation 8 divided by 2 times 6 minus 3 minus 9, and 3 minus 9 being in parentheses. Now, according to PEMDAS, again, the first step would be to take care of in parentheses, so we would do that. We'd have 3 minus 9, which is negative 6. Now, a lot of you guys are looking at PEMDAS and saying, well, the next step would be to multiply, and to multiply 2 times 6. Well, the problem with that is it's wrong. Because even though your math teacher has told you this, it's easy to forget. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like PEMDAS, is because it's easy to forget that multiplication does not always come before division. In reality, it's you multiply and divide in order from left to right. So that's really your third step, is to multiply or divide from left to right. So in this scenario, we would actually take the 8 divided by 2 next. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then we would take and multiply the 4 times the 6, and 4 times 6 is 24. And the last step in our order of operations is to add or subtract from left to right. So for this one, minus negative 6 we know is the same as plus 6. And so as a result, if we go to solve this, 8 or 24 plus 6 would end up giving us 30 as our answer. So it's very, very important to make sure you follow these order of operations. And remember, when you hit multiplication or division, or if all you have left is addition or subtraction, you always do it from left to right for both of those. Now, how does that apply to evaluating an expression? In your homework, you'll be asked to evaluate expressions. Well, part of the problem is knowing, well, what does it even mean to evaluate an expression? Well, remember, an expression, that's just where we have like 2x minus 8 or 3y plus 20. Those are examples of expressions that are expressions because they don't have an equal sign. As soon as we put an equal sign in there, if I had 2x minus 9 equals 8, now I have an equation where x would be a specific value. When we're dealing with an expression, 2x minus 9, x could be anything. I could just plug in numbers for x and figure out what my solution would end up being when x is that value. So that's essentially what we're going to do when we evaluate an expression. The first step is going to be substitute numbers in for the variables. And by the way, they'll always tell you what to substitute in. They'll tell you that a equals 3 and b equals 12 and to plug them in. So you don't have to worry about finding out what those values are. They'll give you those values. And the second step is to use the order of operations to find the result. So let's look at an example. Let's say if I have the expression f plus 3 times d times e, and I want to evaluate that expression when d equals 5, e equals 3, and f equals negative 2. So again, I'm evaluating this expression. I want to figure out what the solution would be when I plug in these different values. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plug these numbers in for these different variables. So instead of f, it's going to be negative 2. Let me actually do this. D would be 5. And e would end up being 3. So now I've done my first step. I've substituted these numbers in for the variables. Now my next step is to use the order of operations to find the result. So again, with order of operations here, I would take 3 times 5, which is 15, and 15 times 3, which is 45, and negative 2 plus 45 gives me a value of 43. So when I evaluate this expression, my answer ends up being 43. Well, now what I want you to do is I want you to try this next example on your own. This next one is negative 3 times f plus 3 times d, all of which is going to be divided by e. So I want you guys to work this out. And so pause the video and then hit play once you're ready to check your answer. Okay, and if you didn't catch this, we are using the same values for D, E, and F, so we're going to plug in these values first. We're going to substitute these values in, so it's going to be negative 3 times F, which is negative 2, plus 3 times D, which is 5, all divided by E, which is 3. So now, when I go to use my order of operations, negative 3 times negative 2 is a positive 6. 3 times 5 is 15, all of which divided by 3. So when I simplify this, 6 plus 15 is 21, all divided by 3. And lastly, our last step then is to simplify this. 21 divided by 3 gives me 7. So we've just evaluated that expression. And that's pretty much it for this lesson. So that should be enough to be able to help you be successful there with your homework assignment. So good luck, and let me know tomorrow if you have any questions.